Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I've got Nick Farabaugh on today, and I want to talk to Nick about the positions available in free agency and who's going to be available in the draft. What positions should the Steelers prioritize to get right in free agency so that the draft is open season? We'll also talk about Payton Wilson, his play on this year, and how he impacts the draft plans at inside linebacker, and our final stars and skulls grades on the specialists for the Steelers, all here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. A reminder, the Locked On Steelers podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcasting network in the world. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future bet and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh, back in the house from PennLive.com. Nick, free agency always gets wild closer to actual free agency. There's the early look guys that we know are scheduled to be, but then there's always those cuts that surprise everyone at the end of the road. Now, there have been some not so surprising cuts like Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb from the Dolphins this week. Those aren't as surprising. The Dolphins need to clear cap space. They aren't really a winner right now. That made sense. There's some rumors that Denzel Ward could be in the mix for this. I don't know how serious that is, but given the class that you have here of current free agents and people that you might expect, if you have any surprising candidates there, what position should the Steelers try to solidify in free agency before they go into this draft class?
Well, listen, I just don't think it's a great free agency class, period, in terms of top-level players. I think there's more depth to it, but there's not a ton of, ooh, wow, that guy's a star, right? To me, the one position that has to be figured out, running back. Just get the running back situation done. It should be Kenny Gainwell, to be quite honest with you, and no questions asked. But I know they have 12 picks, but they're not going to make 12 picks. The running back situation should be figured out. I think that's one. Two, I think you kind of have to figure out quarterback. There's just not a lot of options in the draft unless you just are absolutely in love with Ty Simpson. And Chris, you and I think both agree we are not in love with Ty Simpson.
No.
I think quarterback, at least a short, either whether it's a stopgap or someone that's a semi-long-term answer, has to be figured out. So those two positions stick out to me. Outside of that, I think you start to get into some really interesting talks, because they need a guard, corner, safety, and receiver. Those are their top four needs outside of that to me. And the one position I think that sticks out to me that I would at least look at pretty heavily is one, I'd get a receiver or two in free agency. I think there's enough guys there to where you can certainly get your wide receiver 4, whether that's Calvin Austin, Jalen Tolbert. Those are a few names that I think could fit into that. And then you can get a wide receiver 2-3 type. I'm talking about Romeo Doubs, Jaquan Jennings. I think Alec Pierce is going to be a little bit out of their range. But I think those two names fit perfectly. I think they need to land one of Doubs or Jennings. I think Romeo Doubs actually is a perfect fit for them. And that's a guy I would look at. The other position I think that has some interesting names at least is corner. I do think that there's there. There's a few obviously Steelers connected guys. You have James Pierre there and Asante Samuel Jr. I think of a guy like Jalen Watson from the Chiefs. I think he's an interesting kind of man-up name. I think one real name that could be released by the Packers that has played for Patrick Graham, Nate Hobbs. That one makes a lot of sense to me. Slot corner there. You kind of need to figure out what you want to do at corner. I guess it depends on where you view Eccles, where you view Jalen Ramsey, all these things. And so to me, they need to make a play at wide receiver. And I would look at corner. I really would. I think this is a great draft for safeties. I have liked a lot of safeties I've watched, so I think they can get a young safety, and I think they need youth at safety anyways. And then I think there's enough wide receivers to where you can get another guy in there. On top of that, I also think there's guards in free agency or the draft. So I don't think they have to do it one way or another at guard. So it kind of depends on how they view each market. So to me, wide receiver, corner, running back, quarterback, those kind of feel like the four to me that at least have to be shored up to a degree.
So just giving a spin at guys that they could look at and guys that at least I have my eyes on. If the Steelers were to say go into safety and get like a Kamren Curl from the from the Rams, I feel like that's a guy who had a good year. They just can't afford to pay him. He's 27 years old. That's the other thing. This needs to year with the year. They're not getting, but I think that there's a chance for them to get guys in their mid to late 20s coming off of their rookie deal or like a short extension that they had off their rookie deal. I think Curl fits right in that range when you're talking about the safety position. You went over a lot of the names at wide receiver that I thought could be kind of interesting there. Alec Pierce, I think, is the dream, but like you, I think he's going to be really expensive. Just his big playmaking, his size, and what he brings to the table. I think a lot of people are going to be gunning for him, so that's going to be tough. Jaquon Jennings would be interesting. He's 29, so he's on the tail end of that. But this is where it's going to get tricky. It's trying to find guys at the age. But I think here's the thing: is that free agency, the way the Steelers have typically used free agency over the past years, over most of the Kevin Colbert years, and I believe kind of how they try to use it in Omar Khan years, they use it so that they can appear to go into the draft without a clear agenda, even when they definitely have a clear agenda. But their goal is to try to set a balanced look with their veterans on the roster to say, hey, we don't need a wide receiver in the first round. We don't need a linebacker in the first round. We got these guys. They're going to be fine. And then they go and do the exact same thing that we've been studying on them to do. So, here's the thing. They could sign 2 wide receivers. They could get Alec Pierce. I wouldn't say Jaquon Jennings, but, they could get, a lower-level guy. I don't know, Bo Melton. I don't think he's actually up for free agency. He's a restricted one. But, just going over names, guys that are lower-level free agents that wouldn't be there. If they got, Romeo Doubs and they brought back Calvin Austin, then you could say, all right, we got veteran presence in the room, a guy that we brought back, a guy that we know. Now let's go get a high-level dude and maybe another young player, and then maybe we get like a high draft pick at wide receiver, a low draft pick at wide receiver, and then that sets the tone moving forward. I just think, Nick, there's potential here to still balance out this roster, but I still think that this is going to be like this is not a free agency class where you're going to find the answers to fix big parts of your rosters.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you could find the fix at corner and safety. I think those are 2 spots you could plug in a little bit. Safety, to me, there's enough guys in that class, the free agency class. I mean, you didn't even mention him, but I think Jaquon Brisker is an interesting name, at least for them.
Yeah.
A guy that can at least play a little overhang. It might free up Deshaun Elliott a little bit to do some things. But again, that all comes down to how do you view Jalen Ramsey? Do you want Jalen Ramsey still, right? Like, all these questions have to be considered. There's the Steelers on their own. They're going to probably make some moves in terms of cuts, right? What happens to Patrick Queen? That's going to be a big question, because if he's cut, that immediately, I think, inside linebacker becomes a big need for you. If we're talking inside linebacker, there's an easy signing there in E-Rob, right? Bring back Elandon Roberts. I think that would be a fine move for that. Now, that would obviously, I think, complement Patrick Queen, and maybe you move off Malik Harrison, which I think, I don't think Malik Harrison was very good last year, to be quite honest with you. So there's a lot of different things here. The Steelers also, and this is something I do think people at least have to take into consideration, they have a lot of ability to create cap space through restructures. But I'll tell you what, a lot of those contracts, you look at them and you're like, do you actually want to restructure them? Like, you can create $22 million in cap space by restructuring TJ Watt. But
do you want to really move that money down the line?
TJ? I don't know if I want to kick that can further down the road. Jalen Ramsey, you could restructure. You could restructure a few other older veterans. Like, I think that's going to be something. So they have functionally about, well near $40 million in cap space, and there's probably going to be other cuts and things coming, but that's also got to be taken into consideration. You also have to set aside cap for the quarterback you're going to sign, whether that's Aaron Rodgers or someone else. So that's going to be earmarked for so much of the cap. So there's things to consider there too. I also think, the Steelers do have depth needs that they need to figure out. Defensive line, I think, is a depth need that they could definitely go after. If they don't want to draft one this year, and listen, I think it's a little bit thinner of a draft class at defensive line. I think it's actually a very strong nose tackle class, which is interesting. But I don't think the 5 techs are super strong. So maybe you want to make a move there. You can never have enough depth. Maybe you want to make a move at swing tackle. Maybe that's something you look into. I know you have, Broderick and Dylan Cook and Troy Fautanu, but maybe you want to get a veteran in there. There's a lot of different things the Steelers can do to look at depth pieces too. So to me, though, the obvious upgrade options come at wide receiver, because it's hard not to upgrade in the wide receiver room right now. Calvin Austin's a free agent. Really, the room right now is DK Metcalf, Ben Skoranek, and who? That's really what it is right now. So I think they can make significant inroads there. And then I think the secondary is a place where they can look at it. The one position I just can't figure out, maybe you have an opinion on this, Chris. I don't know what they do at guard. Left guard is the real, I think, wild part of this. Do you bring back Isaac Seumalo? I think that's a real question. You look at the guard free agency class, and there's guys like John Simpson, Elijah Vera Tucker, Wyatt Teller. And while those guys are, Zion Johnson, even guys that are, serviceable, but it's not like those guys are wow, right? And Seumalo, I think you bring him back, he's maybe on a 1-year deal. So I think that's all interesting. Plus the strategy you saw from Spencer Anderson this year, like left guards, I think a real tricky one to figure out. It's also a really good guard class in the draft. So, I think that's one position I can't quite put my finger on yet. And it's going to be a big part of their offseason, because if they do sign somebody at guard, they sign Seumalo. Seumalo is going to get, might get 10 a year. I think he might get up there. So that's the one position I really can't figure out right now.
Guard is a little tricky, but like you said, this is a good guard draft class. They can. I really like Keelan Rutledge. I think there's guys in the middle rounds. Bo Stevens would be another good option. You can get those guys probably 3rd and 4th round. We're talking. So this could be a year where maybe you sign that veteran for a 1 or 2 year deal, and then just say, hey, that's your job, young man. Go get it. If you want to beat a veteran out, or learn, or he could become the first backup to the interior guys. The potential is there. But to your point, a lot of doors are open for the Steelers overall this year, and I agree entirely with you. Do not kick the can down the road. But I don't think they're going to. Omar Khan didn't kick the can down the road this year. He understood, hey, this wasn't the year to do that. You kick the can down the road when you have a 2 or 3 year window open of the group that you've assembled, and you want to buy yourself as much time to win with them and to assemble more talent around them. That's what the Steelers of the late 2000s did, the early 2010s, the late 2010s, the early 2020s. They tried as best they could. We know that the late 2000s they hit. The other areas they didn't, but that's just the cost of doing business. But the cost of doing business is also making tough decisions on young guys. And Payton Wilson is one of those young guys we're talking about. We'll discuss him and how he impacts a lot of things moving forward, and that linebacker position that could be a tricky thing to evaluate this offseason. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you with a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today only at TurboTax. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, talking all things Steelers. I want to spend this second segment talking about a specific player because you mentioned Patrick Queen, and he's certainly a question. Will they sign him? Will they not? Or will they sign him? Will they cut him? Will they not? Will they extend him? What have you there? Patrick Queen, at least you could say he's the leader of the linebackers right now, and he's at least the communicator, and that could be something that the Steelers want to keep. But Payton Wilson did not have the second year that people were really hoping for. We graded him with a C- on the year, 9 stars, 11 skulls when we went back over his profile and his game-to-game performances. And there was a time going into last year where people were saying linebackers locked up. Patrick Queen, Payton Wilson, they got it. Cole Holcomb's the third string. They got it. But that didn't pan out that way. Payton Wilson, very much a liability, not Landon Roberts. Malik Harrison having to fill in a lot more and take on starting duties at some points. What do you make of Payton Wilson, what his struggles are, and whether they're fixable moving forward?
I mean, I think he is a decent sub-package linebacker. I think that is something. He has traits that I think are not teachable. And so technique, I think, around that is teachable. But it's against the run, man. It's the early down stuff. I just don't think, despite having really good length and size, I don't think he really takes on blocks very well. I don't think he's a great block shedder, which is not that surprising. He gets out of position a little too much. He kind of needs the D line to keep him clean. And I really think that's the real thing is he's a guy that knifes through untouched, and it's kind of weird because he's so big, right? He's such a big linebacker that it's kind of interesting to see that. Now, I do think he's a pretty good coverage linebacker. I think he understands his zones. I think that he's obviously athletic enough to be hit with pretty tough assignments. I just think, though, the early down stuff, it's really frustrating because I think the idea was, hey, you're going to draft this guy. You kind of have the tough thing, coverage part. That's the hard thing for most linebackers, right? The coverage part's usually the hard part. But for Payton Wilson, it's kind of the opposite. The early down stuff isn't necessarily there. He's a really good sub-package linebacker. I actually think he's a very good fit for what Patrick Graham wants. They're going to play a lot more in the sub-package world. So I think he'll actually be maximized more. I don't think he's a bad player. I do think that what the Steelers asked him to do last year, which was be a stack linebacker, really behind a defensive line, when you had guys like Keanu Benton, it just wasn't an ideal marriage, right? And that, to me, really spoke volumes of what happened with Payton Wilson. So I actually think the sub-package late down stuff's there. It's just, can you get this guy to use his length more, to use his hands? He's got legitimate jolt in his hands. I've seen the dude lay the wood. I've seen him, when he is on, engage guards and centers and displace them. It's really about technique and a will and a want to in that respect. So that, to me, is the biggest issue. And because he doesn't have the dependable early down skill set, you have to have a thumper like a Malik Harrison or a Landon Roberts to go with them. And then that just presents a whole bunch of different matchup issues with tight ends and running backs and coverage questions and all of that. So it's not perfect when you look at it.
So I ask you this then. How aggressive should the Steelers be at linebacker in this offseason? Because we really didn't go over, outside of Landon Roberts, too many off-ball linebacker options in free agency. But this is a really, I think at least, this is a really good linebacker class. If the Steelers, there's a world that I like to. Y'all know me. I'm a superhero nerd. I got like Black Panther, Superman on my background here. But alternate universes where I always like to explore if the Steelers went this way, what would they do if they went this way? There's this alternate universe where the Steelers draft they trade up and they get Sonny Styles, and that's their new Ryan Shazier. And I'm just like, oh boy, what would that do for the future of this team? And I like the idea of that would be interesting. But if you get Sonny Styles, there's some people who become really expendable really quickly. And I think it'd be an interesting situation for Payton Wilson and Patrick Queen moving forward. But that's where I don't know how their status impacts the plan of how they do it. But even if they don't get Sonny Styles, if they waited, if all the receivers fly off the board, CJ Allen would be an interesting pick if they wanted to maybe trade back in the first. You and I, we go. We see guys at the Pitt facility. We know who Kyle Lewis is. He brings a lot to the table. There's other guys like Torian York who draw some interest there. This is an interesting linebacker class to want a linebacker in. So I just think Payton Wilson's situation, if he played lights out this year, this wouldn't be as much of a question. But because he didn't, and Patrick Queen was solid, he was a good leader, but no one was a supreme playmaker at the linebacker position, and almost every great Steelers team that's ever been has a great linebacker. It would make sense for the Steelers to try to find that guy in this draft.
I think it's one of those groups. There are uniquely strong position groups in certain draft classes to sometimes where you don't even necessarily have a huge need, but you'd be doing yourself a disservice to not dip into it. I remember the tight end class a few years ago was like that. And that's, I believe, the year Steelers took Darnell Washington, which I believe allowed him to fall. This year, inside linebackers are kind of like that. You mentioned CJ Allen. I mean, I'll mention a few other names. I think of guys like Keyshawn Elliott from Arizona State, Jack Goldie from Cincinnati. Red Murdoch. I know that's a guy that people love from the University of Buffalo. He's a real heat-seeking missile, and he has some of the strongest intangible traits in the entire class. Anthony Hill out of Texas. Like, there's a few names, man, that you can name. It's a good linebacker class, and I do think that the Steelers, they don't have a robust array of options past this year. And so I think I dip into that. I mean, you have 7 picks that are probably going to be in the top 150. You are going to have 5 in the top 100. Why would you not take an inside linebacker? Inside linebacker is going to be BPA on some of these picks. It just is. And so Payton Wilson, if he has a very specific skill set, and I think that maybe lessens your hype towards a few prospects. But I don't think it necessarily fits and says, hey, we're not touching that. Even if you keep Patrick Queen, right? He's going to be on an expiring contract. Blake Harrison was a 2-year deal. He's going to be on an expiring contract. So you're going to need a guy the year after that. Someone needs to replace Cole Holcomb. On top of that, is it going to be Carson Bruner? Is it going to be another rookie? Like, I think all of these come into question. And I just took a peek at the inside linebacker free agents just in case they release Patrick Queen. And, I mean, there's some names out there, man. I'm thinking, Devin Lloyd. Like, Devin Lloyd, good player. Alex Anzalone, Alex Singleton. There's some good players at inside linebacker in this free agency crop. So, I mean, to me, dude, this is like one of those positions that should have a young guy probably in it by the time we talk rookie minicamp. But that's just because of the strength of the class. Plus, this is absolutely a future need. Like, if you were drafting for need in the future, inside linebackers up there. And while I like what Payton Wilson does, he certainly, I don't think, has done anything to discourage you from trying to take swings at that position.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I think that's the situation the Steelers are in, man. I think Payton Wilson, I think there's still time to let him figure some things out, but you shouldn't be holding on to anything crazy and passing up on guys for him right now. And like we said, I think this is a linebacker class that could be truly dangerous. Like you said, a lot of the guys that you brought up there, if they went up against the guys in the first round, I think either one of Styles or Allen would be fantastic for this defense and would do a lot there. But, if they went and got some of these guys in the middle rounds, those could be guys that come in and compete with Payton Wilson and be like, all right, buddy, figure it out, because, Patrick Queen's the vet and he's the guy with the contract. And, he's on, if he does stick around, he's on the last year of his deal. So it's going to be a battle for everybody to earn spots for the future. I think it's an interesting situation, and Payton Wilson's youth, athleticism, size, and potential all add X factors to that conversation.
I guess we didn't even mention one name that we should mention, Jacob Rodriguez. And he's going to have a few, everyone's going to ask about him because not only do you have the hype of what he was this year, which, he had the Heisman train that was kind of pushing for him at times. But he also, there's a connection on the staff to him now. CJ Ayu was the Texas Tech outside linebackers coach. While he didn't coach Jacob Rodriguez, he did work with him in the building. That is something at least to note. And I think, Chris, you and I think a lot of people are going to think about Jacob Rodriguez and think, I don't know, maybe he's a top 50 pick. I think that's a little rich for my blood. I think he's
not
a borderline day 2, day 3 guy. Certainly, I think that round 3-4 area for him in this class specifically, too, because of the tremendous depth of the linebacker group. I think that's about right for him. He's a solid athlete. He is very Steelersy on tape. I will say that he is physical. He's willing to get his face in the fan. So would not surprise me. I will say this, even though you and I might be a little lower on him, would not surprise me if he's a Pittsburgh Steeler. He is a very Steelers pick.
I could certainly see that there. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, it's the last group that we haven't done in the grading process, the final stars and skulls of the year. That's the specialists. We'll get to them next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, and then talk about what's life going to be like post Danny Smith. No more bubble gum to chew on the sideline. We'll discuss all that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future. You'll be automatically entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're looking to get on board and you're thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of the year, whether you're picking a team to win the championship or just grabbing a conference title. It adds an extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick your pick cash in, but you can also send you to the finals with your pick. Go to FanDuel.com right now to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future bet and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Nick, let's get to some final stars and skulls grades here. We always save the best for last, the specialists. But as you know, we guys do 1 to 3 stars for good to elite play, 1 to 3 skulls for bad to all-time terrible play, and the bus ticket grade. No bus tickets in the special teams. I want to say this. Some of y'all, and y'all know who y'all are in the comment section, will say, Chris, you got to give the long snapper some grades. So I did. There's really no grades to give long snappers unless they mess up. And there was a couple times he messed up. So Christian Kuntz got 2 skulls and no stars, and he gets a C-. Did you happy now? I hope you're happy. Wasted my time trying to keep track of that one there. And that's no diss to Christian Kuntz. I used to do long snapping in high school. It's a tough job. But in the NFL, do it right. And solid. No one will ever care about you. Do it wrong and you're fired. It's one of the most thankless jobs out there. But yeah, Christian Kuntz, I love him. He's a local guy, but I'm not doing long snappers next year, man.
You know that Will Campbell interview he did at LSU where he's like, if you're an edge rusher, you get a sack, you're a top 5 pick. If you're an offensive lineman, you give a sack a day, you're working at Amazon. It's kind of like the same thing for long snappers. It's like you get 2 bad snaps, and boom, you got a C-, right? You don't even get stars for your recognition.
Unless you go and make tackles, baby.
You didn't even give him like a star where it's like, hey, Christian Kuntz 4 games in a row without a bad step. Boom, he's got a star. I mean, you don't even give him a commissary star, Chris. Like, come on, man, respect long snappers. I mean, long snappers are people too, Carter.
Long snappers are people too.
Disrespectful to the long snappers of the world.
I apologize to all my fellow long snappers out there in the world, because I once had to do that job, and it is rough, man. You got to keep your head down. You don't know if someone's about to crush you. Glad rules in the NFL make it that way, but I used to get hit all the time. Anyways, let's get to things that actually matter in special teams. I want to go to Corliss Waitman because I thought he had a good year. 15 stars, just 4 skulls on the year. Nick, he's not a world breaker. He's not one of the best punters in the NFL, but he's solid. When I look back on the year, he had one bad game against the Bears. That was this really, really bad game. And then he got a skull against the Browns, but every other game he either had stars or he was neutral. And there were a few games. I thought he was really good against the Patriots. He was great against the Ravens the first time around. I thought he was, a big part of what kept them alive in the Browns game that they lost. And honestly, if they had found a way to maybe get some touchdowns, he would have been a hero of the playoff game because he kept giving them field position and chances, and he kept giving the defense, ground to cover. So I think Corliss Waitman, also it's kind of funny because of how modernity in the NFL works with how, like, basically, every year people just get better at kicking and punting balls further and further away. Corliss Waitman's starting to rack up, put himself in Steelers' greatest punter of all time category. If you just look at raw stats, it's kind of weird to look at, but it's true when you look at when you look at punting stats, all time net yards per punt of full time punters. He has the longest net yards per punt average in a season at 41.6. But again, 41.6, not exactly great there. But that was back in 2021. But I look at him, Nick, and I just think, man, that's I think he does a really good job at what he does. And I think it would be wise for the Steelers to keep solid in the locker room right now.
Yeah, he's a free agent, so that is something to think about. The Steelers need a punter. Didn't mention that one on your draft needs list. I do think that Corliss Waitman is a solid punter. I think he's also one thing that I do think he is a very good holder. I think that is an underrated thing for a punter. He did take a few snaps, that Kuntz had, that the one or two that were bad this year, and he put them down. And I thought that was really a good sign to see. He's got good chemistry with Boz. I think his real superpower is he's got great hang time because those gunners were consistently down there with playing time. Some of that was great gunner work from the Steelers gunners, but some of it was also, I think, Corliss himself. He did have there were a few punts that stick in my mind that came at the worst time. The one in the Browns game,
sure.
The Bears game down the stretch when they were trying to come back, he had a really bad punt in there. So there's been some maybe clutch punting moments where maybe he hasn't risen to the occasion every time. But I think overall, he's been a pretty solid punter, man. There's not much I think you can complain about with Corliss Waitman. Overall, very solid punter. And, hey, he beat out Cam Johnson for it. He earned it, too. He was in a punter battle, and he legitimately won that job in training camp. So kudos to him.
Of punters who have at least punted 100 times, even 20, just 20 of anyone who's punted at least 20 times for the Steelers in franchise history, he has the highest inside the 20 punt percentage of any punter in Steelers history, 40.3%. He's also never been blocked. I'm not here. We talk a lot of things football, but we're talking about specialists. They should keep Corliss Waitman. He's not a superstar, but you're not going to have to pay him a whole lot of money. He's a good player. Keep him around. He makes it so that you don't have to worry about the punter position week to week. But let's get to the guy that everyone loves to talk about in specialists, and that's the Wizard of Boz, Chris Boswell. But not the best year for Boz. We've seen some great years, and especially the last 2 years. And listen, this wasn't a bad year for him. 19 stars, 4 skulls, a B+ grade. But I think it's disappointing because for Boswell, he's an A+ type kicker most of the time. I mean, the last 2 years, when you looked at his field goal percentage, he was 93.2% in 2024 and 93.5% in 2023. And so whenever he has a down year, he usually bounces back. Everyone remembers 2018 when he missed a few kicks that might have cost the Steelers the playoffs. That year, he was 65% on his field goals that season. But then he bounced back with 3 straight years in the 90%. And then he had that other bad year in 2022 where he made 71.4%. And that's what led to these last 2 strong years. So in all things considered, 84.4% of field goals, best dip that he's ever had from having elite kicker play. But Nick, I'm not going to pretend to know nor ask you to break down kicker technique and what he does. but I have full confidence that he's still going to be the guy for a few more years, at least for the Steelers.
Yeah, I do too. Listen, I think some of those were blocks that weren't his fault either. That's hurting his
Very true.
percentage. So I don't think that's all his fault. There were a few, particularly down the stretch, Chris, that were a little uncharacteristic. I thought a stretch he had a few bad misses, but I don't really think there's anything to worry about with Boz. And so I think he's going to be steady. One thing about Boz that I do think has been a little bit iffy is him as the kickoff specialist on kickoffs. I don't think that's gone totally swimmingly. There have been some hiccups there. So that's something to think about as well. But overall, it's hard to complain about Boz. I don't think it was perfect, but if you're expecting anything other than a bounce back year, I think that's probably not very smart of you. And on top of that, listen, we're holding him to an all-pro standard. He was so good in 2024 that the dip in 25 seems so stark. He's still a very dependable kicker. Trust me, there are teams around the league that can never find an actual decent kicker and you don't want to be that team. Steelers fans remember Josh Scobie. Okay. That's all I'll say. Just remember Josh Scobie.
And I think that's the thing here is that, and this is the same reason I say about Corliss. You could have some really bad punters.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Presley Harvin had some rough times. When you got good ones, you hold on to them. You find ways to make it work. That's where I think the Steelers are right now when it comes to finding guys in this in special teams right now. You got the guys, but I want to ask you now because we're talking about these players and their grades. So B and B plus for the primary players for the Steelers on special teams. But when you look at their new special teams coordinator, Danny Crossman, what is going to be a task for him to get right that Danny Smith got right in his years in Pittsburgh, or to improve upon what Danny Smith didn't get right when he was, for his tenure?
Well, I think the consistent evaluation of standout teamers was one thing I always respect about Danny Smith. I mean, look at the guys that have rolled through here, from James Pierre to Ben Skowronek to Miles Killebrew to Carson Bruner was unbelievable as a special teamer in his rookie year. I mean, Danny Smith, man, had an eye for special teams talent. There's no doubt about it. I can even think, Robert Golden, Jordan Dangerfield, like Nat Berhe. Like, you remember these guys? Like, legitimately awesome special teams. Miles Boykin, like he had an eye, man. There's no doubt about that. That's one thing that they're going to have to keep intact. I think something else is the energy Danny Smith brought. I think that the Steelers played special teams every single time they went out, no matter the unit, with their hair on fire. And I thought that was Danny Smith's superpower, because you saw his players play with fire, play with passion, and really play with hustle. And I thought that was something that stood out about them. That was Steelers special teams under Danny Smith to me. One thing I think he can improve upon, I don't think the Steelers were super clean on special teams consistently under Danny Smith. I thought that they had, this year they were cleaner, but in a lot of years past, they were ups in the league in special teams penalties. I think that's certainly something that you can clean up. And I also just think, the devotion that Danny Smith had to learning special teams football. Like, listen, I'm not going to be telling you guys that I know anything about special teams schematics. I don't.
Right.
But just things about the new kickoff, protection plans, things that you can do in terms of punt protection plans and punt blocks. I think that's another thing. Danny Smith knew how to drop a good punt block, didn't he? They had a lot of punt blocks over the years with Danny Smith. So lots of things that I think, there's a sizzle there with Danny Smith that you have to replicate, or you make up for it in cleanliness. And I think that's something that we're going to see it with Danny Crossman to see if he can do it. Special teams coordinating, I think, is one of the probably more underratedly hard jobs. It's not an easy thing. It's all details. You're coordinating a group of 11 to really move as one organism, and that's truly what it means in special teams. You kind of have to all be in sync, even more so than offense and defense, because it's less about individual responsibility and more so even about playing together and playing as one unit. And I think that's what's unique about being a special teams coordinator. So we'll see what Danny Crossman can do, but I do think Danny Smith's energy and his eye for special teams talent were the two things that I remember about him the most, and certainly something that I think Danny Crossman's going to have to work to keep up.
There you have it. He's Nick Farabaugh. Nick, thanks for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh. Make sure to check out my stuff at PennLive.com/Steelers. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Steelers Blitz on PennLive.
Absolutely. Nick, thanks for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle's always at Carter Critiques. You can read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. But we're going to be back here tomorrow, breaking all things down here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.